Hello class. This week we are looking at how World War I spreads. Basically, both sides end up getting more and more allies. Now, it started out as a mostly European conflict. We have Germany, Austria-Hungary. Now they are the Central Powers. Then on the other side we have Britain, France, and Russia. These are the Allied powers. Last week, when we looked at the last chapter, we focused on how the war is starting. We focused on things like the Battle of Marne and how the Schlieffen Plan failed. We also looked at what trench warfare is and how it ended up dragging the war out because it being a stalemate. The last thing we also focused on was what kind of weapons were developed. Yes, we did a lot last week. This week, we're going to be doing a lot again. Here's some of our objectives. We have described the spread of World War I, identify how governments establish wartime economies. So we are going to discuss a little bit about the economy at this time. We're going to summarize the Allies' push to victory, so we already have an idea that the Allies are coming out the winners on this side. And lastly, we're going to look at the effects of World War I. The effects of Now, if you remember from last week, World War I is now in a bloody stalemate. What that means is that neither side can advance. This is due to trench warfare, and this is due to the types of weapons that both the German side, but both the Central side and the Allied sides have. The Allies make an effort to basically try and take over Constantinople. This is called the Gallipoli campaign. Gallipoli is a peninsula in the Ottoman Empire. This also marks the time when the Ottoman Empire joins the German side. Now, I don't know about you, but if the Allies were attacking my area, I would probably join the opposing side as well. This is what happens. Basically, what the Allies are trying to do is they're trying to capture the Ottoman Dardanelles Strait. The reason why they want to capture the Dardanelles Strait is it will allow them to ship equipment and other supplies to Russia. Now, if we remember, Russia is often very unequipped. They're not as advanced as many of the other European countries. So in order to keep Russia's army strong, the other Allied powers, including France, Britain, and Italy, they are trying to get this strait, the Dardanelles Strait, so that they can get to Russia. They're also hoping to defeat the Ottoman Empire. It's kind of killing two birds with one stone. If they can take over this strait, they're also going to be taking over the Ottoman Empire's main city, which is Constantinople. But what ends up happening is the Allies lose. Germany realizes what the Allies are trying to do. Germany realizes that if the Allies capture the Dardanelles Strait, that would be a huge loss for the Central Powers. And so Germany gives it its all, and at the end, what ends up happening is we have another stalemate. We have the Allies digging trenches, we have the Central Powers digging trenches, and as we can see from the last chapter, trench warfare always will end in a stalemate. Okay? This is what happens in the Dardanelles, or the Gallipoli campaign. And at the end, the Allies give up. They say, okay, we are not going to get the Dardanelles Strait. We are not going to get Gallipoli Peninsula. We're going to back off. The sad truth, though, is that this whole campaign costs the Allied powers over 1/4 people. That's 250,000 soldiers. Let's look at now some of the battles that are happening in Africa and Asia. Now, many of you may be asking, why are there even battles in Africa and Asia? I thought this was a European war. Well, if you remember, looking back, many of these European countries have colonized different parts of Africa and Asia, Germany being one of them. What ends up happening is the Allies end up taking control of any colony that Germany holds in Asia and Africa. So one example would be that there are 4 countries or 4 areas in Africa that Germany controlled at this time. Since there are more French and British colonies in Africa, it was easy for them to take control over Germany's holdings. They took control over 3 out of the 4. We also have Japan is taking over German areas in China as well. Okay? So basically, not only is Germany being attacked in Germany itself, but every colony that Germany has is basically taken away by these colonial powers. The other thing that Britain and France ends up doing is they end up trying to get their colonial subjects, so many of the Africans that they have taken control of, or Indians, even some Chinese, they are trying to encourage them to join the war. Now, of course, some of these colonies, they're not going to join the war. They're going to say, you are dominating our country. Why would we help you fight a large war? But some of them do. And the reason why they do is they're hoping that if they help Britain, when Britain needs their help, that Britain will reward them by giving them their independence. This is a good example of in India. Now, we've talked about British imperialism in India. We have a man named Gandhi, who is one of the most important men in the 20th century. He is in India, and he encourages Indians to join World War I as either soldiers or to help make sure that they have enough supplies. This way, he's saying that Britain will look on favor on us and hopefully will release us from their control. So quickly, this is back to the Dardanelles in Turkey. Here we have is the Gallipoli Peninsula. This is where the Allied powers were trying to take place. Here is the Dardanelles Strait. This, of course, and if we look at this map over here, they're trying to get through the Dardanelles Strait to Russia so they could give supplies to Russia. Of course, again, just a reminder that they failed at this. Germany was attacking them right here near the Dardanelles. As well, we had the Ottoman Empire was joining in. So they did not get a hold of the Dardanelles Strait. Here's the Gallipoli campaign. Okay, so we have the first wave, second wave, and third wave. These are different armies and military navy ships. Okay? The war affects the world. So now we're going to go on and we're going to discuss another person joining in the war. Much later on, we have America joins World War I. Again, we have another ally joining the Allied forces. This is America. So what ends up happening is Germany has a lot of U-boats. U-boats would be considered submarines. And what they're doing is they're basically starting to bomb any ship that they see in the Atlantic Ocean. So they're trying to take charge of the Atlantic Ocean and any shipping in the Atlantic Ocean. This is called unrestricted submarine warfare. What they're doing is they're trying to sink as many of the British ships as possible. Now remember, British Navy is one of the best navies in the world. So basically Germany is trying to hit England where it hurts most with their navy. But with unrestricted submarine warfare, in 1915, they end up sinking one of England's major ships called the Lusitania. This ends up angering the U.S. The reason why it angers the U.S. is there's about 150, let me see if I get the specific number, 128 Americans on this ship. It hits the newspapers in the U.S. that Germany has attacked the American citizens on a British boat. Now, the Germans were saying that this boat had ammunition. Ammunition is like bullets for guns and bombs. That was true. But that did not mean that Americans were any less wanting to protest. 128 of their men had died for no reason. What ends up happening is Germany says, okay, America, we are not going to bomb any unmarked ships that are neutral in our war. They say that to the U.S. The U.S. does not join the war, but Germany continues to bomb unmarked ships or neutral ships, unrestricted submarine warfare. The last thing that Germany ends up doing that really upsets America is they send a letter or a secret letter to Mexico. But Mexico doesn't get it. The U.S. intercepts it. The U.S. decodes it, and what they find is that Germany is begging Mexico to join the war on their side. They say that in return, they will help Mexico reconquer land in the U.S. that they lost centuries ago. This is the final straw. The U.S. is now angry. And what they do is in April 1917, they join the Allied forces. Here we have the Lusitania ship being sunk. Here is an actual newspaper clipping from that time. Okay. Here is Zimmermann's note. This is the note. Now you can see a bunch of numbers, but this is actually a message in code. So America actually figured out the code, and they figured out what Germany was sending to Mexico. So he's saying right here, join Germany and get a bit of the United States. That is what Germany is promising. War affects the home front. Now, we always often think of war only being these battles. But a world war such as this one affects everything. It affects economy as well. It becomes a total war. And basically every nation devotes every resource that they have to this war. What that means is that the government is taken over by a military government which provides rations for certain goods. Also, every factory that may have in the past produced different products now will only produce products for war goods, such as bullets, ammunition, weapons. Okay? The last thing is rationing. Basically, the government limits the purchase of certain goods. Now, this can be anything from bread, butter, any sort of food, to clothing. The last thing that many of these governments end up doing is they make propaganda. Propaganda is one-sided information. And they do this to build support for the war. Okay? We're going to look more at propaganda this week, as I'm going to make you do a propaganda poster, hopefully. Now, while all these men are off fighting in the war, the people who end up working in these factories are women. This is important to note. Without women, there would be no war. Okay? Thousands of women, they end up having jobs. These jobs used to be held by men, but now women have to make these bullets, ammunition, and weapons. Another thing that women are end up doing is they are many nurses on the war front who are also women. They're helping these soldiers. Here we have some examples of propaganda. Allies win the war. So the first thing that ends up happening near the end of this war is Russia withdrawals. We're not going to focus too much on this right now because we're actually going to look at this revolution. But basically, there's unrest in Russia that basically makes Russia back out of the war. This is a huge loss for the Allied powers. But what ends up happening is the Central Powers, even though they don't have to worry about Russia, they end up collapsing. Germany moves all their troops to the Western Front. There is a huge battle. There's a battle between the Allied powers and the Central Powers. What ends up happening is that there are over 140,000 or 2 million American soldiers fresh coming in that allows them to win the war.